Awesome. Well, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us for our second mini workshop here with Ben Cadronell from Advocacy Chiefs. We're excited to have you in the space for choosing the right topic for your SBIR program and really identifying the topic that's going to help you get funded in this process. And so for those of you that I haven't had the pleasure of meeting, my name is Cameron Law. I serve as the Executive Director of the Carlson Center for Innovation and Entrepreneurship here on campus at Sac State. We serve as a regional hub and platform for providing approachable and accessible entrepreneurial education, community, and support to enable startup founders of all backgrounds to start and scale their businesses. And we're proud to steward the Sacramento Entrepreneurial Growth Alliance, which is advancing entrepreneurship as a driver for economic development. And Advocacy Chiefs is a core partner in that work as we look to unlock our potential in the region and commercializing technology coming out of our universities and leveraging those federal funds to power your ventures with non-dilutive capital. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Ben Cadronell, who heads up the Advocacy Chiefs, who will be diving into our session. And if you do have any questions, feel free to throw them in the chat. We are recording this session, so we will follow up with the recording as well as the slides. So you don't need to take screenshots as we're going because you will be getting those. But with that, take it away, Ben, and appreciate you all being here.
Thanks so much, Cameron. I really appreciate being here as always. Really appreciate you all taking time out of your day to join for this, hopefully what will be an informational session. If I don't get all your questions answered, or if I don't cover something you want to talk about, please let me know, because we're kind of developing this series as we're going, and your feedback is really helpful to figuring out what people want to hear about. So with that being said, I'm going to share this. Again, feel free to throw them in the chat, raise your hand. I'm fine with all that. I'm going to try to keep things brief. Brevity is my is I think all of our friends, and so again, the goal here is to maybe stimulate an idea or a thought or a future conversation where not everything's going to get covered here, but really if this has kind of stimulated a thought or an idea, I want you to reach out to me, schedule a time as part of this project. I'm really happy to meet with all of you. I say that over and over again, but I really do mean it, and I'm always excited when I get a new calendar invite through my calendar app. So, all right, this is a project funded by the city of Sacramento, so couldn't be here without them. Really appreciate the funding from the city of Sacramento Innovation and Economic Development. Obviously, Cameron and the Carlson Center are great partners, great ecosystem partners. We also work with UC Davis Venture Catalyst, a number of other regional partners as well. Really just I'm a connector by nature. I'm an attorney by trade, connector by nature, doing this grant work for about the last 10 years. So the SAC SBIR program, we'll talk a little bit about what the SBIR, which means the Small Business Innovation Research Program. Some of you may have been to some of these sessions before, recognize a few names. So again, the goal is to find 10 qualified companies in Sacramento to apply for this Small Business Innovation Research Program. We've already got our first two cohorts essentially locked. We're developing our third cohort at the moment. So really the goal is to increase private sector commercialization and get a broad range of participation from the region. And it feels like we've been doing that in large part thanks to folks like Cameron and Raphael and all the partners. So the Small Business Innovation Research Program, in order to kind of understand how to choose a topic, or whether your topic is suitable for the SBIR, or whether you have a high degree of success or a likelihood of success of winning an SBIR, all of kind of which are intertwined in this conversation, really need to understand what the SBIR is trying to accomplish, right? And so it's a phased, non-dilutive federal research and development funding mechanism. And it begins at the very earliest stages, right? Pre-prototype even, from feasibility through commercialization, right? So it's a phased approach from phase 1 to phase 2, and sometimes beyond to phase 2 for some agencies. And there are 11 participating agencies across the federal government. And again, this program the SBIR specifically funds and incentivizes high risk, high reward innovations. So sounds like I'm being repetitive, but I kind of I've said this before, I should say, in previous conversations, but it's important to note that really focusing on these high risk, high reward, what we call moonshot innovations. So things that have a degree of a likelihood of failure, even. Risk not just for money monetarily, but the technology itself, the leap of innovation. So funding inherently favors collaboration, right? So this program, the sister program of the SBIR is the STTR, which is the Small Business Technical Transfer Program, Technology Transfer Program, and that specifically requires a partnership with the university. Because so much of this innovation comes from research universities, most of these projects have a university tie-in at some level. Which is why we have Raphael here from the Technology Transfer Office. We're going to be actually doing a conversation in September, I think September 16th, I think is the date, around intellectual property considerations for small business owners around this program, and what it would mean to partner with a university. It can be a little bit scary at times to partner with a big institution, but hopefully we're going to help demystify that in the future. But again, the reason we're having these programs with the university is because this program inherently favors those types of partnerships. A lot of this research has to live somewhere, right? And so the universities tend to have facilities that are available for these types of innovative research programs. It just bolsters the likelihood of success when you have a really trusted partner who has carried out research successfully in the past. If maybe that might be if that's a shortcoming on your end, or you might not have as much experience. So again, I call them pro tips. It kind of feels silly calling them pro tips, to be honest with you, because it's just so obvious at some level, right? You got to carefully review the solicitation. Each one of these solicitations clarifies priorities, clarifies intention, right? They take a lot of time to write them, and they're really beefy, which is why people don't necessarily want to dive in. But you'll find a treasure trove of information, and you can leave it to professionals like myself or my colleagues, over at who are helping on the technical writing side. But honestly, as the subject matter expert in your particular field, you want to know what the agency is looking for and whether your particular research aligns. The last one, dive into divisions, right? So agencies are big creatures, and there's even silos within these agencies to some degree, right? They might have large, overarching priorities, as I'm calling it here. But the reality is that many divisions within agencies have specific priorities, and you want to understand what those specific priorities are. And one thing I will note, because the topic here is choosing your topic. The next slide, I guess that's the next slide here. Choosing your topic, right? If you're in a position where you're just most people are coming into this with a very clear idea of what their research is, right? That's where kind of choosing your topic, you're already going to have an idea of what your research is. So you're trying to find a topic that aligns with that research, right? But if you're in a position for whatever reason that you're looking for, and I was just talking to Cameron about this, but the university is a great place to identify potential research and potential innovations that need to be commercialized or looking to be commercialized, that are just looking for somebody with an innovative spirit to take them and run with them, right? And the university loves to partner with folks like that, and they have very clear mechanisms to license their technology and to help develop it. So backing up a couple of steps, again, market really drives the SBIR investments, right? Every year, about $4.5 billion get invested in small business innovation, and really it's kind of like the tip of the spear, right? The government looking to solve major societal problems using innovation, and investing where other folks might not, where venture capital might not, right? It might be too risky of a proposition at such an early phase, but the federal government's willing to take those because the gain to society might be so large that it's worth that investment. So in order to do that, these are some of the things that we kind of look at, that I'm doing, right? Reviewing industry journals, like reading constantly, and trying to understand where markets are leading. Um, Something I don't do, but I've kind of, in my research, I've seen other folks do. Patent filings are another great way to kind of evaluate where trends are heading. Um, again, you don't want to be chasing the patents necessarily, but again, to understand where money's being invested in innovation, it could be a great place to start. But really, where I kind of lean in is universities and the government policy and grants. For example, when I say government policies and grants, what do I mean by that? Like the Inflation Reduction Act, for example, or the CHIPS Act, right? These are major government programs where they're investing major dollars into climate technology, manufacturing, right? And so there's going to be a focus in that regard to how do we support these investments and ensure that we're getting the best for our dollar. And that's where the SBIR comes in, and they're able to fund some of this early innovation in some of these spaces that might take time to build greater efficiencies in manufacturing, or to find mechanisms to store energy for extreme climate events, or all these things that we're projecting, right? So the Inflation Reduction is a great example, because these are mandates that are happening 2030, 2040, 2050, and the technology might not exist today, but it needs to exist in order for us to meet those mandates. And so that's where the SBIR comes into play. Last little bit here is seek information from the source. This is where I always turn, right? The primary source of information, that's reaching out to the program officers. So when you look through the solicitations that I mentioned, that I said you should read, right? Within those solicitations, there'll be program officers listed for each of the topics or each of the divisions. And you want to reach out to them and talk to them and ask them about, and tell them about your research, and ask them about their priorities, and see if there's alignment directly from quote unquote the horse's mouth. So, and they may say, no, it's not a fit. This is what we're experiencing directly right now with our participants, right? We've had a number of them that say it's not a fit, but you need to talk to so-and-so at this division or this institute. I think it's a better alignment with them. And we hadn't even been thinking about them, but now we've got this firsthand knowledge and this information, and we reach out, and lo and behold, it's a match. Because, reading between the lines, this is what, maybe the solicitation was general, but this is more specifically what they're looking for. I feel like I'm going, I guess I'm going at a decent pace. So 2024 trends. We're working with Stacy Chin, who's a PhD, co-founder of Scout Climate and Keep Your Equity. I asked her what are the 2024 trending topics, and these are what she talked about generally, that she had identified. Again, these are evolving, right? And this is not specific to any one agency, but thinking about, again, this helps you kind of frame, right, the government needs or the government policy, the industry investment and the SBIR program, and that kind of triangulation of those things. So opioid crisis has been a major societal issue. And from the healthcare perspective, always looking for interventions that are tackling that kind of issue, innovations that are addressing inequitable minority health disparities. AI and ML, you're going to see that everywhere. But really, how do we leverage those in various industries to, again, create maximum efficiencies or change paradigms in how we deliver services? You're seeing it in healthcare, you're seeing it in a lot of different places. You're seeing it in transportation. I've worked on AI, ML, and transportation, and healthcare. The clean energy piece, it goes without saying, right? Renewable energy efficiency. There's more rapid extreme climate events. We're learning the long range transmission of energy creates risk and is costly. And how do we meet these climate goals for the future, right? These are all some of the pressing challenges that we're trying to meet. These are things that are happening a lot of research, I imagine, at Sacramento State around these issues. And the last one is advanced manufacturing materials, something we talked about a little bit too. again, improving production, efficiency, sustainability. I had some like second life battery uses come across, like what's going to happen with all these automobile batteries or these, electric, lithium batteries, once they reach their end of their useful life for their intended purpose. How do we use less precious, materials in developing those batteries so that they're, easier to break down and less costly to make. And so all these things are things that are, they're, again, focuses for the SBIR generally, but each agency has a particular focus. And I kind of go over the, if you're a founder, you need to be who are we looking for? You need to be for-profit, small business located in the US. You need to be creative, like novel or transformative concepts, right? So they're not necessarily looking for a 2.0 unless that 2.0 is so vastly different from the original version that it completely changes the way that we look at the first version. And I have an assessment guide here. I think Cameron has that, but I can share again. There's a self-assessment guide. If you think this program might be a fit for you and you want to be considered for that third cohort, and you look at this self-assessment guide and you say, yeah, that looks like me, right? I have about a 3-year roadmap for the research and development and commercialization of my product. It's going to take about, 300 grand to make a prototype or, test my prototype. And that phase 2 is about $1 to $2 million, depending. And it's really novel, then you may be a great fit for this, right? So I want to hear from you. Whether if you're questioning and you're not sure, I'd be happy to talk you through that as well. So with that being said, I would love to have any questions if there are any. If you want to ask me questions specifically, separately, I've left my email information and the calendar information here on this. You can go ahead and book some time directly on my calendar, and happy to provide you any support that I can.
Right. Well, happy to bring any questions you might have. Feel free to throw them in the chat. I can help facilitate them in, or if you want to use the raised hand feature, feel free to do so. In the meantime, I am throwing the link to our next workshop that Raphael will lead on IP considerations for SBIR. So I got a question here. Do we need to be citizens or permanent residents to apply for this grant?
Yes. So typically you need to be, your company needs to be majority owned and controlled by US citizens or permanent residents. So more than 50% owned and controlled by US citizens or permanent residents.
What other questions might you?
Thanks for scheduling, Jeremy. Looking forward to meeting with you.
Jeremy, go ahead.
You mentioned the third cohort. Could you talk about the timelines for that and anything that you didn't mention about that selection process?
Yeah. So second cohort is scheduled for September through essentially the end of the year. I imagine the third cohort, though it's not firm yet in terms of the date. I imagine it'll start sometime in mid-January once the dust settles from the new year and people are kind of back in the saddle. And we'll go through the grant program goes through May, but we'll essentially work from mid-January through May on the submission, probably through April on the submission. And then the process for selection goes a little something like, so we receive all the folks who want to participate, schedule time with me. We do an informal assessment. If you leave that call feeling like you want to move forward after you have all the information and you think you're a viable candidate, then you would submit an executive summary, essentially, of your research to me that you're proposing, and then we'd collect that, the bulk of those, and review them, the totality of those executive summaries. My technical team, which is essentially Stacy and myself, and the initial criteria is have to be, priority goes to City of Sacramento residents because it's a City of Sacramento funded grant. And so that's kind of the initial threshold. So either your business is in the City of Sacramento or you're a resident of the City of Sacramento. And then from there, it's readiness. So we basically each give a readiness, go through that readiness assessment that you saw. And we basically we each rank based on assessment. Ideally, there will be overlap there's going to be 3 spots left in 3 spots in cohort. I think 1 spot has been filled already. So there's essentially 2 spots left in cohort 3. And we're essentially going to be, and we're looking for additional funding. I'm going to just, we're looking for funding, but right now we have two spots. And so once we kind of go through give priority to the Sacramento applicants, and then assess readiness, assuming there's overlap between those are the folks that we pursue. If not, then it's essentially kind of a discretion. It's our discretion internally. And there's some other factors that go into it, like, the City of Sacramento has some diversity, equity, inclusion goals that we're trying to meet as well, that are factored into our decision making, although it's not the primary factor for consideration, but it is a factor. So I hope that helps. It's not an exact science.
I had another question come, I think, directly to me. So, what stage do we need to be as a company product to apply for this grant? $300,000 is the maximum amount, and how long do we have to build the working prototype?
Yeah, so typically you want to have, you don't want to be starting from like 0, right? Because it's a very competitive grant. So there has to be some kind of tangible research that's been done, or like some indication that there's something to pursue. You might have some data that you've collected or something. And it's typically you don't have to have a prototype. It can be, you can be feasibility. You maybe develop a prototype and test feasibility of that prototype. And typically it's 6 to 12 months, with more erring on the side of 12 months for development of that phase 1, essentially proof of concept or prototype that's been tested, essentially. And the goal would be to test it in such a way that you're demonstrating there's a viable path toward commercialization, and essentially, position yourself for phase 2 funding, which would be development, like commercializing your prototype. And does it count for food items? I mean, food and agricultural technology is certainly a topic. There's strict funding, like budget requirements. So it's typically, limited to research and development activities and consultants thereof. But there is a fee, a small business profit fee that you can, so you're using hemp hearts. If it's part of your research, I imagine it would be an acceptable use of funds. And otherwise you would just, there's a small business profit fee, like I said, it's about 7% that you can use for pretty much anything. That's not required. You're not required to necessarily report that. It's for, basically profit, essentially, for participating. And Amanda, if you want to meet separately and set up a meeting and we can discuss your project more specifically, I'd be happy to do that.
Perfect. All right. Any last questions that we might have? If not, in buying us a few seconds here for those that are thinking of maybe a question or finding a way to ask it. Again, we will have our next session led by Raphael here IP considerations for SBIR. I don't know if you wanted to, Raphael, do a quick pitch while you're on here and kind of speak to what that will be. And in the meantime, as Raphael does that, Benjamin, would you mind sharing the link for the cohort application?
Oh yeah, it's just my email. It's honestly just my email, but I'll put it in here.
So I'll be filling you in on what happens with this IP that you develop while you're using the grant money, as well as how IP is affected when you do a subaward to a public university. So it's very critical, I think, to know how IP is affected. But I've worked with other companies at previous institutions that did SBIR subawards to the universities, and it worked out well for them.
Awesome. Well, we will be back at, I think it's at noontime on September 16th. Use that link to register so you get the right Zoom link to join us. There'll be another quick focused session, just like we have the last two. And we'll be following up with the recording as well as slides of the session here. And then also the links to sign up for the cohort or time with Ben. So with that, I want to say thank you, Ben, for coming on in and sharing a bit more about choosing the right topic, and looking forward, Raphael, to you leading the next session. So thank you all for joining. We will see you on the 16th, and have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye.